Hey guys, welcome back to Margot Watches Movies. My name is Jake Margot, and I'm going to be talking about the series finale of Andor. I wish I'd been able to review this hand in hand with episode 11, but work got in the way, so I'm posting these a couple hours apart. Now, let's just talk about the show in general for a second before we get into the episode. It has been so long in the world of Star Wars on the screen that we have gotten storytelling truly worthy of this wonderful universe. Whether it be through lore, world building, the mind of George Lucas, and I believe either today or yesterday was his birthday, so happy birthday to the creator of Star Wars. But it's been so long since we've had something worthy of this universe. And Tony Gilroy, the showrunner, the writer, the cast of Andor, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, and so many others, Stellan Skarsgård, all the technical aspects, the costume designers, the set designers, the visual effects team. I believe they got the set designer from Chernobyl, and it pays off. And we finally have a show that is great. And it's not just great within the realm of Star Wars, but it's a great TV show set in the Star Wars universe, made for adults, trusting the viewers, not holding your hand, loudly pointing at something and explaining it. He trusts the audience's intelligence, he being Tony Gilroy, and it pays off. I'm a big fan of this show. Now, I have some issues with the series finale, and it might be a little bit different than what most people might be saying. I can see people being disappointed by this episode as a finale. The finale of The Shield, it is not. And that's okay, because a lot of times in these worlds, and there's so many examples of great TV shows. You think of early seasons, Game of Thrones, my personal favorite show of all time, The Wire. They have their big explosive climaxes in the penultimate episode, meaning the second to last episode of the season or the series. And typically they take that season finale to tie in all the storylines, wrap things up while setting the stage for a future season, or in this case, tying it into Rogue One, a Star Wars story, the movie. And I think my issue in this episode the most is not the lack of action, but the fact that it almost felt like studio interference in a way. I don't know if this was Gilroy's decision, but they start the episode off basically as a continuation of the end of episode 11. And in my opinion, it disrupted the pacing of the episode a little bit. Everything after that is wrapped up felt like rushing to get from A to B, and they didn't have quite enough time. I don't know why this wasn't a little bit longer. Maybe that's just me enjoying the show so much I didn't want it to end. I'm happy to acknowledge that. And that is a little bit of the case. I would happily watch 3 more seasons of Andor. But I really believe that the bookend, the start of this episode should have just been the end of episode 11. It got wrapped up in about 5 to 7 minutes, and it's really one of the standout characters from Rogue One, the movie, and these last 3 episodes has been K2SO, the droid, and he gets Andor and Kira and the other gentleman out of this predicament where ISB is on their heels. The gentleman that took over for Deidre is there leading the charge with a bunch of big, special forces guys. And, again, had this ended episode 11, not only do you elevate that episode to maybe being the best episode of TV all year, better than even episode 8, but you give an extra 5 to 10 minutes to let this finale breathe. And it felt like they needed that split up so that there was some semblance of action in this finale. Because if you take that out, it's basically just 30 minutes of wrapping things up through dialogue. And I don't have an issue with that. Personally, some people might, and I totally understand if you're a person that you want your finale to have some big explosive, bombastic type of final fight, or you want a cliffhanger. I get that, but I don't think that's always necessary. It's how the story unfolds. And this story did not need to end on action. It picks right back up in Rogue One, where there'll be plenty of action. But if you just strengthen episode 11 and let it conclude, and not let it be a part one of really like the first 10 minutes of the episode, and you let this episode breathe on its own, you're not having to rush things. You're giving more time to let the situations breathe. You're giving more time to, you could have devoted 2 more scenes to a couple other characters, maybe a little bit more time with Dedra in the cell. Maybe getting to see Krennic one more time. And, that's really my complaint of the finale. It just felt like they didn't trust that the audience was going to be willing to accept a series finale that was devoid of action and was just cooling down. Because we've been on such a high for 5, 6, 7 straight episodes. I personally would have been fine with that. Now, did I still like this finale? I did. And there were some really great moments in it. There was also a couple confusing moments to me. So I'll recap briefly. So they're stuck, we kick off, they're holed up in the apartment. K2SO comes and starts just wrecking havoc on the Special Forces team. He takes the new ISB guy in place of Dedra, and in one of the most brutal but kind of comically funny moments of all of Star Wars, he kills the guy and he's just using him as a human shield, as this like big bad, main Special Forces dude is shooting, and he's just shooting the guy in the chest. And it was brutal for Star Wars standards. And, he wraps them up, and they get out pretty easily. They have a line to kind of justify why there's not backup. They're all devoted to this disease propaganda that they've been putting out. So they don't have enough teams in the sector to get there in time to catch them. Andor, Kiro, the other guy, and K2SO all escape, and they get back to Yavin. There's some issues with them landing in Yavin. The rebel leaders are upset. While Kirill is in the hospital, Andor gets called into a small council meeting, reminiscent of the Jedi Council, or the small table in Game of Thrones. And the way they reacted to his news, really, I don't know if it was intentional. Was it bad writing? I don't think it was bad writing, so it felt intentional, but it kind of called back the arrogance of how the Jedi Council was in the prequels. They never gave Anakin his dues. They didn't take the threat of a Sith possibly, they didn't even acknowledge the notion that was possible of a Sith returning, and their hubris in the end is what led to the demise of the Jedi. And this council shares a lot of similarities. And as far as Andor goes, Diego Luna gets some of his best acting chops in of the entire season in this scene, as he's having to deal, with the exception of Mon Mothma, even Organa, Leia's dad, is acting incredulous to the fact that there is a super weapon. They're dismissing Luthen. And I guess it kind of makes sense, with as morally gray as of a character as Luthen was, that he would have detractors within the alliance. And that makes sense, because again, this is a guy who is not inherently good. He did very bad things for a good cause. But the way they react to this news was something that didn't seem like you had a good foundation for a rebellion that could succeed. It didn't seem to be the same group that is in Rogue One, with the exception of Mon Mothma, and thankfully she's there, and it's a testament to her character as kind of the glue of the rebellion post-Luthen. Because if she's not there, this rebellion would have failed. They wouldn't have taken this threat seriously. And she enlists her sister or her cousin, I'm never quite clear on that, to kind of get some info out of Andor. Eventually the threat of it is made seriously, and Andor is given permission to go to Jeddah, where Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker from the movie, is there. And that's basically the starting block for Rogue One. Now they wrap up other characters, because I was sitting there, there's like 10 minutes. I was like, how the hell are they going to wrap everything up? And they smartly do basically like a montage with some really good score music playing, and you get a glimpse of where all the other characters have been that were missing. We see Dedra locked away in a cell, crying. She's going to die in there. She won't be getting out. You have a really nice scene with Partagaz, Qyburn from Game of Thrones, who is basically being summoned to answer for his failure and getting Andor and Carol, when they had them dead to rights. Now that the guy got killed, all the blame is falling onto his lap, and the gentleman that comes to get him, you can see he knows what's about to happen, and he feels bad about it because he has respect for Partagaz within the Empire. And this was a guy that did his duty and did his job well, but he was working for animals, and he feels this failure. He asks for a moment to collect his thoughts, and I think the guy that was escorting him, that was supposed to escort him to this hearing or sentencing or whatever, he knew it was going down because he didn't want to collect his thoughts. He wanted to take his blaster and shoot his thoughts outside of his head, and he takes his own life. And it was a pretty pragmatic way to end this character, and it just wraps it up efficiently. Wasn't anything, the excitement, like it wasn't like a good versus bad, he's in a situation where he gets his comeuppance. He handled business. He failed, he knew he failed, and he made himself pay for his failure. And I like that in for that character. And as we get towards the end of the episode, even like characters I was wondering what the heck happened, like Mon Mothma's husband, and it's a very good show don't tell instance where it just shows him next to a Star Wars escort or a cheap woman with a drink in his hand, and he clearly is devastated and has lost himself into lust and drink over Mothma leaving to join the rebellion. And you kind of get to catch up with every other character, and it wraps it up efficiently. Nothing too exciting. And then the best part of the episode for me, though, was basically the final scene, the final frame even, where we cut to Bix, who they withheld pretty much for these whole 3 episodes. And it makes me wonder if there might be a spinoff in the works. But in a brilliant stroke from Tony Gilroy, he does the best thing he could for the legacy of Andor, and you see Bix with a child. Now, we have to presume it's Andor's child. The ages match up for the time jumps. And I thought that was a really touching piece of writing from Tony Gilroy. I really liked that. And all in all, was this the S.H.I.E.L.D. finale? Was it the 6 Feet Under finale? Was it Breaking Bad Felina Filat finale? No. But it did an efficient job. And the ride and the journey to get to this point was so good. It was so enjoyable. Other than, the first 2 episodes of this season were disjointed and slow. The 3rd episode was definitely an improvement. But all in all, this is the best piece of Star Wars we've had since Revenge of the Sith. And it's more quality than that. It is iconic. I don't know. But it's more quality. The writing's better. This is probably my favorite piece of Star Wars in a long time. This has made me feel emotions I haven't felt for Star Wars in a long time. I feel like I'm reinvested into the universe again. And my only thing is Kathleen Kennedy. You gave him the freedom, so I'll give you your kudos there because I don't like you. But you gave this guy, Tony Gilroy, the freedom. If you want to save your job, just throw the keys to the kingdom to Tony Gilroy. Write him blank checks. Let him do whatever he wants, because this is the guy that should be handling Star Wars. I'm definitely I'm gonna probably watch Rogue One after this. If you guys want a review of that, let me know. But I'm curious to know what you guys thought of the Andor series finale in the comments. Give me your opinion. Were you satisfied? Were you a little let down by the lack of explosiveness and it basically being a denouement to the climax of last week? I'm just curious to know what you thought. But all in all, had they let the episode breathe a little more, taken that beginning and made it the end of episode 11, this would have been a really good finale for me. As far as it goes, I'll probably give it a 7.5. The season 2 of Andor overall, I think, is in an 8.5 to 9 range. I'll go back and forth on that. But we've had 2 masterpiece episodes, the best episode of television all year, episode 8. So I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna give this a 9. 9 out of 10. Andor as a whole, seasons 1 and 2, 9 out of 10. This is fantastic. It's Star Wars like we've never seen it before, made for adults, mature, thematically rich, multi-dimensional characters, spectacular set design, the best looking show that has been on TV in a long time. And the best looking show Disney Plus has ever done by a mile. And it showcases when you hire talented people and you let talented people be creative, this is the result. When you hire activists who value their political ideals more than quality storytelling, The Acolyte is the result. So please, for the love of God, Disney, learn a lesson from this. More Tony Gilroys, less The Acolyte, less Book of Boba Fett, less Kenobi, which how the hell did they ruin that show? But they did. Hopefully Ahsoka is a bounce back season 2, because I didn't particularly like season 1. I know some people are fans of it, but like, this is what we need. This is bringing adults back into the picture. This is getting people like myself who have been so disinterested and uninvested in Star Wars for a long time now, since they walked out of Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi, sparking that excitement again. So hats off. It was a wonderful ride. Was the conclusion as great as it could have been? No, but the journey was fantastic. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in for all these reviews. Give me a like, give me a subscribe if you like the review. If you like the episode and you want to share some of your thoughts, please, again, let me know in the comments below. But as for that, this is Margo Watches Movies. My name's Jake Margo. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.